Afternoon, PS and team. Welcome to PSC. Can you introduce your company and team to the members of the PSC?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I am Abina Moore, Permanent Secretary, Office of the President. To my immediate right is PS Tucker. She is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. And to my immediate left is PS Krogan. She's PS for the Ministry of Public Service. I must let you know these two PSs were they were part of the Ministry of the Presidency in 2017 and 2018. That's why they're beside me, because they were accounting officers in their own right. And so there are queries here that they would answer for their ministries. At the back of me is my PASF, Ms. Paula James, to my extreme right. Immediately behind me is Ms. Sipasad. She's the PASF acting for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. And then I have Mr. Dazel, who is the Chief Accountant for the Ministry of Public Service.
Who's acting? Is the acting PS for?
PASF.
Oh.
Ms. Sipasad.
What was the abbreviation for? What's the abbreviation?
Principal Assistant Secretary. PASF, that's the highest position in the finance section. Okay. So this is the person for OP, and this is the person for Culture, Youth and Sport, and this is the highest position in the Department of Public Service, Chief Accountant.
Okay. All right, members, we have 39 paragraphs for our consideration. I'll put the first 20 paragraphs. The floor is open to members for questions. Yes, it's about years. So, yes, that's correct. The first 10 for 2017 and the first 10 for 2018. Those paragraphs are before us. Member Siraj, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 259, 260, 317, 319. It's an observation, and maybe the PS can comment, because I note they respond in relation to contracted employees. But Mr. Chairman, they're out of 102, only one, and this 102, I assume, are people below 45. Only one opted to be employed on the fixed establishment. So that's the observation I'm making, because it's a very small number who's opting to go on the fixed establishment. Yes. Is this my choice that out of 102, 101 prefer to be contracted employees?
Mr. Chairman, I said earlier, yes, it's not by choice. Back then in 2017, 2018, there was a policy where persons, once they were eligible, they should go on the fix. And like I said, we made efforts in terms of having them fill the form, and we would have submitted it to the relevant authorities. Of course, there was still some reluctance, but generally, persons do not want to go on the fixed establishment.
44-2, Mr. Chairman.
Your mic, sir.
Sorry. Prime Minister calling. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. 342. CCTV system purchased and not delivered. Is the position the same?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the position remains the same. However, I recently received a legal opinion, which I'm guided by now, and I am soon to approach the FS so that this matter could be finally be written off. Because from the legal opinion, it was said that time has elapsed. It is now 5+ years. And if you're going to bring a matter before the court, it's supposed to be 3 years. That's with the Guyana situation. If we still want to pursue, we'll have to hire an attorney in the US so that those laws over there can apply to the particular situation. So that's just an update on the matter.
So, PS, do you have the circular in regards to what you just made mention from the FS concerning writing off of outstanding monies that have been owed to the agency for a number of years? The FS would have informed the Public Accounts Committee of a new direction, which he would have sent circulars to all of the accounting officers that if there's any overpayments and such like exceeding 3 years, you can write with a justification asking for those to be written off. So it won't be a constant feature on the Auditor General's report.
Noted, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Follow up, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
This is an overseas supplier. Can I inquire as to what process was used to award the contract to this overseas company?
Yeah. From the best of my knowledge, Mr. Chair, this project was awarded by the National Tender Board at that time in 2015.
We are on the 2017 and 2018 reports, honorable members. Do we have any other questions for the paragraph that were put? Member Maribor?
Sir, I am at 267 in 2017 and 343 for 2018. May I proceed?
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
I see that overpayment in the sum of 2.308 million was still not recovered by the ministry at the time of reporting, and it is reflected in both books. May I ask what is the current status of these overpayments?
Mr. Chair, the situation remains the same. What we did, we contacted the contractor. We organized a meeting. He came in. At the time, he said he was not getting work, so he could not have repaid. But he did promise that he would. What I did, I followed up via phone, but his phone went unanswered. I am committing to write again because I have an address to him. I could write him, and I will see where that goes.
May I ask the name of the contracting firm?
It's Jai Kishan Construction Limited.
Jai what?
Jai Kishan.
J-I-K-A-I-S-A-H-A-N. Go that for me one more time, please.
J-A-I-K-I-S-H-A-N.
Jai Kishan
Construction.
And may I ask if this contracting form or construction or whatever form is still receiving contracts?
No, we checked the system. I spoke with the accountant general and she did, and no, he has not received any contract from the government since 2015. So he's no longer in the system.
Do you know if there's a reason for him not receiving contracts? Since 2015, you said?
Yeah, but I don't know if he's registered under another name.
So this is an expense. This is an expenditure that this is an overpayment that happened prior to 2015.
No, it happened in 2015.
Oh, so this is a contract that was awarded to him in 2015.
Yeah.
When was it awarded? When in 2015?
I have the exact date, but I can supply that to you.
Okay. How does a ministry for these capital projects, how does an overpayment happen?
An overpayment happens when, let's say you have a bill of quantities and you're supposed to do a specific amount of work. Now, when the engineer goes to the site, you're supposed to be supplying 50 windows and you supply 20. It therefore means that money that you would have charged for the 50, the difference, because you did not supply the item, it means therefore I overpaid you because you did not supply my 50 windows. So,
all right. So you as accounting officer depend on your engineer to provide you with the correct information in order to process payment.
Correct.
Before the engineer provides you with this information, he has to or she has to physically verify that the bill of quantities was satisfied.
Correct.
So in other words, the ministry pays on measured works.
Yes.
So a case like this, where there is overpayment, is an indication that payments were made before the works were measured.
That can happen, but like I said, I don't know the specifics in this case because I was not there at the time. So I am just...
So who was there at the time?
The former PS. This happened in 2015. I was not at the office of the president in 2015.
But Mr. Maripol, we have had instances right here at the PSC where engineers would have approved projects and say that it has been completed. And when the audit office go to verify the very said project, faults are discovered.
Yeah, no, well, that is what I'm getting at, Comrade Chairman, because we're streaming live and the media is present. And I know that sometimes we run away. And when I say we, I mean the public run away with basically creating a belief in their minds that because it happened in a specific year, it is attached to, if I may say, the government of the time without understanding the system and what really happens. Because the policies and direction of a government is created by that government, but the execution of these works are done by public servants and servants of the people. And I'm trying to establish, and perhaps the PS can verify if I'm accurate, that when this contract was awarded, like many other contracts that we have unearthed right here at this PSC level, it was found that majority of these overpayments are really because of the engineers not doing what they have to do. And that is to ensure that they create this certificate of completion after measuring the work. So even if the contract was awarded for $15 million, you cannot pay that $15 million unless the work that you have measured amounts to $15 million. And what we have found in this PAC, sir, which you would agree with me, is that many of these ministries, departments, and regions that we have examined and what we found at this Public Accounts Committee is the fact that overpayments happen by way of accounting officers signing off for these payments after depending on their staff, their engineers in specific. A certificate of completion can only be generated after the works are measured. And the real point I'm getting it at is that the PS, the accounting officer, and if I may extend it to the other two PSs, who are the accounting officers, is that there is need for them who are supervising these staff to ensure that they measure the work and you pay for what is measured and not necessarily for a certificate that is created. And many times we found that these certificates were created out of these engineers basically sitting in their offices and depending on probably hearsay, and they write certificate of completion, send it to the different departments to process, the contract is paid. And when the Auditor General visits these very sites, and when his engineers go and measure, then is when they see that it is an overpayment that was made. And you know what is the sad thing, sir? The Auditor General's office only handles a percentage of the work. So if your ministry has, if your ministry was given $1 billion or $100 million of work, the Auditor General probably just 10%. Audits about 10% of that. And many times the possibility exists based on what we have unearthed, that the majority of this could possibly fall under the caption of overpayment, and it is the country that suffers. So my appeal, sir, with your permission to the permanent secretaries, is that they need to have a greater sense of responsibility to their junior staff, the engineering department, especially in the manner in which they do their work. And I'm not putting any blame at the level of our permanent secretary or any government per se, but the staff has to function effectively if we're going to account for the people's money. And that comment, sir, is also linked to paragraph 344 of 2018, where we see again here overpayment for distribution line and system and night lighting system, respectively, at the synthetic track and field facility. These are things that are tangible, things that can be found, things that can be measured, things that ought to be accounted for. And no payment should have been made for them unless they are there. And unfortunately, we don't have that situation in the system. And mind you, Comrade Chairman, this is not in any way just related to the Ministry of Presidency or the Ministry of Public Service or the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports, but it's something that we found right in this PAC with reference to all the other ministries and regions. So there is need for a greater focus in terms of how the engineering department of all ministries, all departments and all regions, how they operate and how they function. So I just want to make that point, sir. Thank you.
Point taken, but added to that, besides the engineers that signs off on the project, there's also the works committee that has their responsibility as well. So there are several layers of checks and balances that ought to be done before the final payment, but your point is well noted. And I do believe is the FS on? FS, I believe you would have advised the committee that these officers, particularly the engineers that signs off on these projects, if they fail to do that which is required of them, they can be surcharged. Can you refresh the committee with that position you would have articulated?
Chair, it is unfortunate that we have to deal with these issues, but the fact of the matter is the engineers, we rely on the engineers to do what they're supposed to do, and it's only after the fact, because accounting officers are busy doing so many things, we learn about these issues, right? So I'm actively looking at how we could strengthen the system so that we can minimize the these irregularities. But as you indicated, Chair, I would, for me, I would treat it as falsification of documents because the engineer should know better than most persons in the system whether we receive certain items or we should pay for certain works. They're on the ground. They have intimate knowledge of what is taking place. So if they choose to recommend payment for 50 windows when only 20 when only 20 was supplied, in my humble view, that amounts to falsification of documents and borders and fraud, right? So I think that is how we should look at it and institute the necessary remedies, right, including surcharging persons when they're found guilty of these irregularities, right? I don't know if I was clear, Chair, but that's my position because how could you receive 50 windows and how could you want to receive 20 windows and claim that you collected 50, man? And in a lot of instances the irregularities are as glaring and absurd, right? As was described by the permanent secretary, right? We get caught up as accounting officers because we're not close to the to where the activity is taking place, and we rely on our professionals to give us the best advice and guidance. And if we don't signal to the system that persons will be punished for this type of thing, then it will continue forever, right? That's my take on this issue, Chair.
Thank you, PS. But sir, you definitely would lend to give guidance on how these measures could be corrected. But I wanted to put it to you, is it because, and this shouldn't be a reason for what the engineers do, but can we give some thought to the fact that a lot of these engineers, particularly regional engineers, they're grossly underpaid and they are overlooking millions of dollars in contracts. I mean, isn't this an avenue where it lends to the promotion of corrupt act with these type of revelations that we're experiencing? I mean, a regional engineer gets less than 1,500 US a month. So I think more thought should be given with respect to one, how we pay our public officials in the execution of their duties. But this is no excuse for not doing what is required of them by law. But I believe we need to really assess going forward how we compensate engineers and professionals who are in the public service, lending their services. And if we really want to stamp out or minimize corruption to a greater extent, then I believe we need to award our public officers what they should be rewarded with respect to their qualifications and the services that they're given. But like I said, let me reiterate, it is no excuse for professionals who are being paid to do a job not to do it in accordance with the law.
Yeah, Chair. If I may, Chair, that's an important point that we need to drive home. That look, once you're a public servant, you may not necessarily receive compensation that you may be happy with, right? But as a public servant, I'm speaking as a public servant. The biggest joy I receive is the opportunity, satisfaction I receive is the opportunity to serve the people, right? And nothing should encourage any officer or public servant, right, to breach the law and to get involved in activities that that borders on corruption, right? All of us, we have ethical standards that the profession required to observe. Engineers, I know, they have their own ethical compass that are no different from any other professional, including accountants, right? So we just got to be diligent. It's a complex problem, as you indicated, Chair, a very complex problem, right? And it will require much more, it will require a solution which is not too simplistic, right? So that's my contribution, Chair.
Noted. AG, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, just to point out to the members, at paragraph 344, over the weekend, it's back on Friday, we were supply additional information. So that will clear this amount of 4,140. This information was supplied to us on Friday. So this is now cleared at overpayment.
Oh, it no longer exists?
No, because it was a contingency and we wanted to know what were the detailed work was to be done. And the PS was able to, with his engineer, able to trace what was done and in detail tonight.
But let me share.
Hold on, let me get the engineer the floor to add to what the AG is saying, and then you'll have.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. The previous discussion with FS, if I might humbly share my views or my recommendations, I think that not only the engineers should be taken up to task, the contractors also have a responsibility. When they bid for projects, they have to have an engineer on board at least to be deemed competent. And when final accounts are being prepared, the contracts would normally say that the contractor is to submit his valuation, which is cross-checked by the project engineer. They both agree on what was actually done, and then they both sign off. So in the event of us at the audit office picking up overpayments, even if the ministry does not have records to show or missing documents that might not be able to show clearly what was done, the contractor should have in his records, in his possession, and this is what was actually done. We need to also be cognizant of the types of contracts that we administer. There are different procurement models. There might be design builds. There might be measured works. So you got to look at it. The contract is entitled to advance payments, then interim payments, and then a final payment, ideally. But then the procurement model might have percentages. It might have phases. So it's a holistic approach we have to take and not just go looking in one direction. The contractors too are responsible, and I think it's very dishonest of them. If they didn't do something, they would accept payment first.
Chair, if I may, I agree with the engineer from the military office, right? That even the contract document requires some careful review and amendments, right? And then we could utilize the debarment regulation, to encourage contractors when they're notified about the problem to do the honorable thing and repay the money, right? So the solution is not just punishing the accounting office or the engineers, but looking at all of the pieces and ensuring that all the gaps in the system they're corrected, right?
Noted, yes. Mr. Maibo.
Thank you, Chairman. I have some different views. First of all, I don't disapprove of your position where you speak about compensation for these public officers. And I do recall a parliamentary speech delivered by the former chairman of the PAC, now head of state, where he did articulate quite clearly that public servants should get proper remuneration. He did. And I do remember him loudly from the video speaking about what about our nurses, what about our doctors, what about our police officers, men and women in uniform. And of course, not excluding the very engineers we're speaking about.
He said public servants should be
I think
properly.
it was 20% he was looking at or something of that sort. But let's not get distracted from where I'm going. The same way how we're advocating for these engineers that are overlooking these hundreds of millions of dollars in project, perhaps similarly, and I know you will not disagree, we can also add the engineers from the audit office who unearthed these.
All engineers, all public servants.
Thank you, sir. But I somehow am of the opinion that not because you get more money means you ain't gonna do the wrong thing.
True.
It has to do with the individual and their attitude towards the work that they have. And of course, that coupled with proper management from the persons who they account to. So if they have a lackadaisical person that is responsible for them and they see the avenue to probably go down the road of participating in unbecoming activities, all of those are factors to take into account. So I know we had an REO in Region 3 when I was in the system. He used to go out and go with the engineer and ensure that the work is done, and he witnessed the measurement of the work and so on. Maybe that is why Region 3 was cleared up until I think 2017. I think we cleared for Region 3. But the issue I have with taking contractors to task is because the money is in the custody of the government official. When the budget is passed and the monies are released to the respective agencies, it is in the custody of the accounting officers of those respective agencies, whether it's ministries, departments, or regions. And the accounting officer has a responsibility to the state to ensure that the money is accounted for and properly spent in keeping with the program that they are overseeing. And by virtue of them having staff members, and in this instance, we are zooming in on engineers, it is the engineer that creates the bill of quantities based on the project that the region has approval for. So it is the engineer that knows all the specific needs of the project, and the engineer also recommends an amount of money for each one of the lines on the bill of quantities. So when a contractor bid and the contractor puts his number, it is awarded based on the lowest responsive bidder. And it is the contractor who would have indicated at that point in time that they can satisfy this project at 5 million, even though the engineer says 7 million. So when they go and execute the work now, it is the engineer who has to ensure that the work is done to satisfaction and done to the number that they bid, providing there is no change of the scope of the work. And then the engineer has to measure the work to verify that it is being catered for before payments are made. And that is why I disagree about holding contract. Perhaps it's the most humane thing to do. Perhaps it's the conscionable thing to do. But the reality that we are faced with is the fact that the engineer is the person that, and the engineer of the agency that has responsibility for the finance. They are tasked with that responsibility of ensuring that the works are measured. Because when you from the audit office, when you go to these respective projects, you don't go by yourself. You go with the engineer of the ministry, of the region, or of the department. And you don't use a different measuring tape from what they have used. The same device is what is used. So when you pick up the fact that the work was measured by you and you got a different figure from the engineer, there and then is the evidence that the engineer didn't measure the work. So the engineers cannot run away from accounting for the monies that are within their programs. And it is evident, based on the findings of this Public Accounts Committee, that the engineers have basically been lackadaisical in the execution of their work. And that is why, Comrade Chairman, the fundamental point here is for better supervision, and it is for a more closer relationship with the engineering department and them executing their work to the satisfaction of the country, because it's the nation's money we are talking about. Just my 2 cents to add, sir.
Do you have any additional? Yes, Ms. Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just have to make the point that when it comes to overpayment on contract, we have been discussing this at length. I think it's every single agency that come before us have an issue with overpayment of contract at one point or next. So I say that to say, sir, that we don't have to go around and say who should be responsible for what, because the guidelines are extremely clear. What we need to be speaking about rather is how do you enforce the guidelines that are very, very clear. We have the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. We have things very much spelled out as to how payments should be made and all of those things. But what we have is a system in which those guidelines are not followed efficiently. And as you would recall, as the records would have it, one of the very first meetings of the PAC, well, I think it probably was the 3rd meeting, if I'm not mistaken, I had made a point that we need to look at this particular matter holistically. And I had made a point to the accountant, to the Auditor General rather, that when we're speaking about overpayment and so forth, we need to look at it collectively. And because if we were to actually do a summation of the amount of overpayment is done in totality for all of these agencies or for the year, that figure would be startling. That figure will be startling. So we need to not just speak about what should be done, because it is spelled out very clearly how these things should be done. This is not a question. It's here, it's in writing. Everybody could go, everybody have a copy of it. The problem is the enforceability of what is going on here, holding persons accountable for not following the guidelines. So we will come back here year after year with the same thing if we do not find a way in which these persons are held accountable. Yes, we could say the contractors, yes, we could say the engineers and all of these. It is spelled out. This is how it should be done. And if it's not done like that, we need to hold persons accountable. How do we hold people accountable? That's the question that we need to address at this level. At least we come back and we have the same discussion every single agency, every single year. And it doesn't make sense in going forward like that.
And for reiteration purpose, it's only 10% of these agencies that the audit office audit. So you can only imagine if he's finding out of 10% an entire book with over 400 or 500 pages. If he's to perhaps do 100%, maybe you should do that for the 2020, sir, and the 2021, because the public perception what it is.
Go ahead, members here.
I know the public perception is things are much better now. Mr. Chairman, if I can, with your permission, go to paragraph 327 for 2018. I don't have an update ministry's response with me, so pardon me if I am asking that which was already supplied.
Okay, before you proceed, all of the remaining paragraphs I put to the committee for consideration. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So of 348, actually, 358 really, with 10 from 2017. 185 of payment vouchers were found. It's 163 for 2018 plus 10 for 2017. That's the latest report I have. But if the PS have any additional information or update information as it relates to payment vouchers not being found totaling $55.6 million, I will welcome such an update, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Sir, Mr. Siraj said, my colleague said that the public perception is good for something. I didn't get it clear, sir.
Members, we have the remaining paragraphs before us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's paragraph 327.
Proceed.
And it's for 2018. I'm just looking for an update on the latest position, if there is one.
Mr. Chair, the latest position in respect of the unpresented vouchers, we stand at 119 vouchers.
We didn't receive anything, Mrs. Siraj.
Thank you.
Members, there being no other questions, Mrs. Siraj?
That's okay.
Good. Members, there being no other questions, I would like to thank PS and our team for making an appearance before the Public Accounts Committee. Thanks to all of the advisors from the Audit Office, FS, and all the members of the staff of the Parliament for your services for today. We're dismissed. Meeting adjourned for next Monday.